Today, we're excited to welcome Laura Hoffmann-Ostenhof, Central Europe lead at Gridcog. With a background in energy consulting, Laura plays a crucial role in supporting Gridcog's clients across the UK and Europe, helping them make data-driven decisions to accelerate their path to decarbonisation. Laura, we're glad to have you with us. Welcome to Next Time Around.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Next Time Around, brought to you by Powerverse, the podcast where we take on the big questions of the green transition and explore how the world is changing for a cleaner, brighter future. We're your hosts, Lauren Forster
and Richard Britton.
And we'll be diving into the tech, the policies and the big ideas that are reshaping industries and people's lives. Whether it's cutting-edge technology or shifting priorities, we're here to figure out what it all means for you and the world that we're building for tomorrow. So get ready as we take a fresh look at how changes today are laying the groundwork for a better next time around. Thanks very much for joining us today, Laura. It's really interesting looking at your background. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I am originally from Vienna, born and raised there, went to school there. And then at some point I was really interested in physics, knew I wanted to study physics, but also knew I didn't want to kind of stay in physics forever. And the schooling system in Austria is very, say, formative. So if you study physics, you'll become a physicist or a physics professor. It's probably not quite as tight as that, but a little bit more in that direction. And I was somehow aware that in the UK, it's a bit more fluid. You can kind of study one thing and then go into and still find your path in a different industry. So I moved to the UK after school to study physics at Warwick. Did that for 3 years. It was interesting, but as I kind of knew, it wasn't my eternal calling. And I've always been somewhat of a, let's say, idealist. In school, I was kind of that annoying kid that was fighting with everybody else about refugee rights and all that kind of thing. So I knew I wanted to do something that could combine my science background with something good for the world, I suppose. So yeah, sustainability, renewable energy, that was kind of a sensible path to bring those two together. Yeah, and then I did my master's in energy systems at the University of Oxford, so stayed in the UK for that, which was a really brilliant course, gave me a great kind of overview in terms of what's going on in the energy world, what really are the parts of the energy world, what kind of subsegments could you actually go work in. Yeah, and then I went into energy consulting after that. Well, yeah, after the course, I had a nice overview in terms of what's kind of out there, but not really what kinds of companies exist and what actually would be an interesting thing to work in or direction to work in. Yeah, which is why I went into consulting, because in a way I saw it as an extension of studying, because ultimately, yeah, you continue learning. And when you're in consulting, you get handed from project to project. It's quite stressful, but you learn so many different things so quickly. Yeah, so I did that. For that, I actually moved I moved to Berlin. So back into the EU, I suppose. And now I'm back in London at Gridcog, have been at Gridcog now for around a year and a half. Yeah, and obviously Gridcog is a super exciting place to work.
Fantastic. We'd love to hear more about your time at Gridcog. It sounds like you've had an incredible journey to get there and being able to apply what you've done at university. I think that's quite rare. Although both of us are actually doing that too, because we both did geography here.
Yeah.
So we've fallen into it too. But it'd be
Sets
great.
you up for everything and nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be great to hear how you're applying what you've learned in consulting and obviously in your degree and what you're doing at Gridcog now.
Yeah, it's really cool because obviously Gridcog is still super broad, but much closer to what's actually happening. So we still work with so many different types of customers. I think we'll probably get into this in a little bit more detail later. Yeah, we sit a little bit closer to the customer wanting to decarbonize or wanting to invest in some projects and then actually doing that, which feels like the logical progression in terms of coming closer to the actual projects after consulting, which was a bit further removed from that. Yeah, and then obviously the types of customers are very similar, to be fair. So it really just feels like the next step along the value chain for them as well.
Perhaps for our listeners, you could tell us a bit about how Gridcog got started and what it does.
What we actually do.
Yeah.
No, for sure. So Gridcog, the startup, was founded out of Australia in 2020 by our two founders, Pete and Fabian, who actually had an energy startup before Gridcog as well. Yeah, and then founded out of lockdown, out of home office in Perth in Australia in 2020. And originally, they focused more on behind-the-meter customers, so kind of corporations that want to, energy users, things like that want to reduce their carbon footprint by investing in energy assets. Got a bit of a pull from front-of-meter customers as well, back in Australia, large utility-scale solar or battery developers. So that's kind of how the product grew, just a little bit by demand.
And so for those that are not as familiar with the language in this space, the behind the meter projects were things like helping companies reduce emissions by the stuff they're doing within their companies. Is that right?
It would be, I suppose, behind the meter, I always try to understand it as there's some assets that you invest in. So say a solar panel, battery, wind, if you like, that sit behind the same meter as the rest of the factory or the rest of the energy consumption. So for example, a supermarket that would like to put solar panels on their roof, that would be a classic behind the meter example. Or a manufacturing site that would like to put EV chargers on their site as well, or electrify their fleet, things like that. So it's kind of when it comes along with existing energy consumption and they all share one grid connection, that's what we call behind the meter. I think there's actually quite a few definitions of behind the meter and front of meter out there, but that's what we call, that's the one that we landed on.
So these are the projects that companies are doing to help cut down their energy costs and increase their carbon efficiency within their operation. But then the business moved into the kind of the grid scale stuff, you're saying? Exactly,
because it's kind of a natural extension, because the way I think to think about it is for behind the meter assets, so say solar or especially batteries or any other sort of flexibility, and I'm already going quite deep here, but for them to actually make sense behind the meter, the commercial connection to the grid, so let's say the pricing that they buy the energy on, has to be somewhat volatile. It has to be maybe just a time of use contract or something like that, so that sometimes it's cheaper and sometimes it's more expensive to buy this electricity or sell. That's when solar panels, but especially flexibility like battery, make most sense for behind the meter customers. And then as soon as we have that volatility of market pricing, wholesale markets, pass-through contracts, day-ahead wholesale markets in the software, we can easily, or not easily, but it's quite natural to then go, okay, if we already have all these markets now in the software, we can also serve front of meter customers, which live way more off of these markets. Their entire financial model, basically business case for large-scale solar plants, large-scale battery plants, or co-located ones, are based on that market interaction or trading on markets. But that's kind of the relation of how you can grow from one into the other.
Really interesting. I imagine the numbers are quite finely balanced in this, because I remember reading a Bill Gates article once about the cost per kilowatt hour as you store it in a home battery or in a site battery that you've had to invest in, versus if you're just consuming it straight off the grid. So these must be long-term projects, and they must be ones that are kind of finely tuned with debt and financing as well. Is that about right?
Exactly. Yeah. We, in Gridcog, our customers come to model their projects and get a kind of answer in terms of what it might look like financially over that lifetime out. The whole financing and debt story is kind of beyond the scope of Gridcog per se. But obviously we do often see our customers then go to banks or equity financiers with our results to be able to finance those projects.
I think you've touched on it slightly already, but it'd be great to go into it in a little bit more detail. Is to describe really what Gridcog does and how it helps solve the problems that your customers are kind of looking for.
Yeah, definitely. So Gridcog ultimately is a software solution for our customers, a software as a service startup. And what our customers can do is basically create a simulation version of their real project. Usually they start actually with a baseline, so they model on a scenario level basis. They start with a baseline which actually reflects entirely their current site, and then they change things like, okay, actually currently I have just an energy consumption profile that's on a flat tariff. What if I add solar? What if I add a battery? What if I add EV chargers? Our customers kind of build their scenarios like that on a physical level, but also on a commercial level. So what if I changed my flat tariff to a wholesale pass-through contract or engaged in market trading in any other way. And obviously that is kind of the setup. What our customers can also feed in are the physical constraints of the site. So what is actually the grid connection limit that you have on your site, or what are the actual specs of your solar and battery assets, etc. And then once you have kind of configured all of that in Gridcog, you press a big green button that says run simulation, and the software will basically turn all of that into a big multi-integer linear programming equation optimization. So the sim engine will actually access, so what sits behind, I guess, that interface will access some AWS service and solve this big equation in an optimal way. Basically spit out actual asset dispatch profiles. So what will your battery do in that scenario at each point in time? So really on an interval level, not only your battery, of course, your energy consumption, grid import, grid export, solar asset, all your assets, what are they actually doing at each point in time during the entire lifetime of your model? And what does that mean commercially? So what is your cash flow over the duration, and how does that cash flow actually get generated? Yeah, I'm not sure if I was 100% clear on that optimization part. The way that works is the optimization really goes to maximize some value streams, some commercial value streams, and minimize some commercial value streams. That's kind of the brain behind Gridcog.
Amazing.
Is that clear?
So absolutely clear. So that your customers have got an idea at least about which of the variants in the system they want to maximize, whether it's like carbon emission reduction or cost reduction or something else, and then they put the rest of the parameters in. Am I?
Yeah. So just to be clear, it's all a commercial optimization. So we can't currently minimize for CO2 emissions, for example, as a result of the optimization. But what we can do is we can say, put a CO2 price on emissions and then minimize for that price.
Yep.
So in extension, you could do that. But yeah, ultimately, you're trying to have somebody make money off something and save money off something else. But yes, they come in with an idea of a project plan.
There's a lot of stuff in the press at the moment. There's changes coming in terms of ESG rules to drive tighter reporting, holding companies to account on that carbon component. Imagine your software is quite applicable to that.
Yeah, so it's not something we focus on at the moment, but we do have outputs that take you through your emissions. We have multiple different emissions models actually that you can use. There's some flat emissions that you could just input, kind of this is our grid emissions. But then also what we can do is we can attach kind of interval level emissions to markets. So say you're modeling a project in 2024 and you want to know exactly how much emissions the grid had at, say, 3 p.m. on the 28th of October, 2024.
As you do.
Exactly. And we are able to kind of put that information in and match that exactly to actually calculate a very granular emissions profile of your site, which as far as I'm aware, goes beyond the ESG requirements at the moment or the normal kind of carbon accounting. But our customers can kind of choose how much granularity they want in that.
Sounds very useful.
Yeah, definitely. You're actually way ahead of where it is now. You've discussed that customers behind the meter or in front of the meter are projects that you've worked on before. Could you tell us who your ideal customer is?
Yeah, so there's multiple different customer types and customer segments that Gridcog appeals to, just by virtue of being so customizable and kind of customers being able to model very different types of projects in Gridcog. I would say the majority of customers are large-scale project developers, behind-the-meter project developers, sometimes also energy users, so big supermarket chains, factories, companies like that, though those do have to have some sort of internal energy team in order to be able to use the software because the energy is complex. We can try to make it as simple as possible, but we won't ever be able to reflect all the complexities without having some level of complexity in the UI as well. So we do have some energy users in there as well if they have energy teams internally. If not, we often have consultancies kind of working for them as a middleman using Gridcog for their projects as well. And then, of course, also electric vehicle fleets. So Shell, for example, is a big customer. They're looking to electrify lots of their forecourts. And that gets really difficult with grid connections. And often it makes sense to add a battery to those kind of very remote forecourt EV charging stations. And then often adding a battery there makes sense to kind of increase the power capacity of the grid on that side. And then the last segment is also technology providers. So companies that might manufacture their own new batteries or sometimes even optimizers that kind of come to us and use Gridcog as a proposal tool almost to kind of show their potential customers, look, if you buy our battery, this is
how you can benefit from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a value calculator on steroids for them, really, isn't it?
Precisely.
That's your tagline right there.
It is. I like it.
I had a follow-up question. We were talking about it on the way over here, and we'd imagine that maybe some of your customers would be some big infrastructure and utility companies that are going through a shift and a transformation. What about the ones that are sort of starting from scratch? I'm thinking about the companies that are financing and building the wind farms and the solar parks and so on, where that's their game. Do you work with them at all?
Yeah, so we usually would probably put them into front of meter developers as a category, asset owners as well.
Yeah.
So for example, Golden Peaks Capital are a big German, Polish company that work with huge solar and battery plants in Germany and Poland. And they use Gridcog to kind of calculate how much money they might make off these huge farms and kind of to justify their investments as well.
Really interesting. Thank you.
So you've obviously mentioned that you work with some big players and have like quite a big portfolio of companies internationally. What are some common themes that you see companies kind of getting right and wrong when they come to you for advice?
Yeah, I think what we actually see quite a lot is companies underestimating the level of complexity that is required for these renewable energy projects, especially when it comes to things like value stacking via different market trading opportunities, things like that. There's, so many of our customers tried to build Gridcog in-house before they came to us and failed and ended up making some very, rough assumptions, such as if you trade, again, this is quite deep, but for example, there's multiple different wholesale markets in most Western countries, I suppose. So you're able to either just buy and sell in one of them or kind of buy and sell in all of them and even buy and sell in between those. And often if companies try to create their own in-house model, they would just say, okay, if I'm trading in all three of them, I'm just going to add 10% of revenue to what I had before, because that's kind of a nice, easy blanket assumption, which is obviously incredibly wrong and can be incredibly wrong depending on the year, depending on the moment, depending on the prices at each point in time. Similarly, in ancillary services, there's so many assumptions, like if your battery bids into those frequency ancillary services, it won't get accepted every time, it won't then get activated every time. You kind of get money for all those steps. We've actually did a test on this. So for example, if you assume that your battery will get accepted every time it bids into ancillary frequency services, and also that it can bid into these services kind of in half an hour increments, whereas in real life, in the UK at least, it has to be in 4-hour blocks. You can get the revenue of ancillary services wrong by 2.5x, which is insane. So this is based, as far as I remember, on 2024 prices.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the scale that I'm talking about. So quite a lot of times companies come in and go, yeah, I've tried this, I've somehow gotten the revenues completely wrong. Can we scrap all that I've tried and do it again properly with Gridcog? So yeah, I think probably underestimating complexity in renewable energy projects would be my answer here.
And is there a dimension to that as well around, this is a very physical industry, there's sites and there's construction, you mentioned substations and connecting it up to the grid. Presumably there's important timelines and stuff that need to get hit in these projects to make them all work. Is that always well thought through? I've read a lot about getting the modern grid connected up as being kind of a challenge in this area.
Yeah, for sure. There are always people that complain about TSOs and TSOs that complain about projects. I think it's a endless cycle of complaining.
So just for listeners, what was that acronym?
TSO, transmission system operator. So the ones operating the high voltage lines. Yeah, I think it's a eternal cycle of complaining about one another. Some may say it would probably work a little bit better if they all work together a little bit more. But yes, I mean, for us, usually that's a step after Gridcog. So we're very much in the pre-feasibility stage. But certainly, yes, there's some complexities that our customers experience. a nice example maybe is in Germany, for example, right now, there's 500 gigawatts of battery storage waiting for a grid connection, which is insane.
Yeah, that's huge.
Wow.
And there's quite a not so smart process and a way in which it works in Germany right now. So kind of, it's not super clear who will get picked first, and it's not like be ready first, then you'll get the connection first. It's kind of just like, where are you in the queue? But independently of that, some batteries might get or some of these assets might get a spotty grid connection or a dynamic grid connection that say, actually, you can't export into the grid at noon because we already have God knows how many solar panels exporting into the grid at that time. And
your business started in Australia, didn't it? And
yes.
They're renowned there, aren't they, for that problem?
Exactly. Yeah. So what customers actually really like to do in Gridcog is, for example, bring in these assumptions as well. So say, if I, have a battery on this grid connection point with these limitations, how much would that actually impact my investment case? And usually it's not as much as they think, because usually during those grid congestion times, the prices are bad anyway. So you wouldn't want to export into the grid anyway. So if you optimize your battery properly, that wouldn't really be a problem anyway. So yeah, a lot of that I think is, in a way about education as well, communication.
Yeah, really interesting. Just the complexities that you've listed there that have to be accounted for. I'd love to hear about the other complexities that you kind of encounter, especially as you move across the different markets with regulations impacting kind of your simulations and assumptions. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So of course there's countries like Australia, but also Germany that have this plethora of solar energy being fed into the grid and the need for flexibility coming out of that. But then on the other hand, you have the UK, which was much earlier in terms of battery deployment, utility scale battery deployment, but not really due to there being so much renewable energy and intermittent kind of generation, but just due to the fact that it's an islanded or almost islanded grid, and that there's many challenges coming with that as well. So there's multiple different challenges across the world and across many different energy systems, which often can be represented in similar ways and can be solved in kind of parallel ways, I would say.
I mean, when you explain it, there are so many layers to it that it's like an onion, isn't it? You just keep peeling them away. So it would be really interesting to hear about how you go about attracting your customers and the sort of the sales process on that, because I can imagine there's lots and lots of knowledge behind your platform. I'm just interested in the way that is presented in the market.
That's a really interesting question. Yeah. So we certainly have our business development team. They're always looking for new companies to work with or who would like to work with Gridcog. But then we also have the team that I work in, which is the industry team. And we're kind of the Gridcog experts, if you like. So the expert users. So a big part of our role is to help existing customers to navigate the software, properly represent their projects in the software, understand the results, but also we're always kind of on the pulse of the industry of what's happening, so that we make sure through that the software always lets you represent what's happening and what customers actually want. Yeah, and with that, of course, we play a big role in the kind of sales process as well. So as soon as the actual process is kind of, there will be an interested company, then we take them through a 75-minute demo session, which will be with one of us and one of the business development team, and really kind of take them through an existing or through a demo project that really speaks to their use case. So for example, a front-of-meter developer in Germany would not be very interested in a supermarket project in the UK. So we do have, lots of different pre-built demo projects, and sometimes we build new ones for interested companies to really take them through, answer all their questions, and make sure that they are confident in the platform before they subscribe. Yeah, also because then, of course, when they come on board, it is a bit of a learning curve. I think I already mentioned it. It's a complex software because the industry is complex. So we want to make sure that it's also the right people using it that will be able and wanting to go up that learning curve and will actually see the value in Gridcog.
And what have you been noticing then over the last couple of years whilst you've been there in terms of the momentum that's building around that and the sort of the pipeline and the interest for the service you have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We obviously used to focus way more on GB. at least in our London office where I'm based. And at some point, we got a lot of organic pull from continental Europe. So in the beginning, it wasn't really an active decision to move into or expand into continental Europe. We got more and more questions from especially the Benelux in the beginning, who have huge grid constraint problems. So many, especially behind the meter companies are getting, again, weird grid connection, dynamic grid connections or things like that, and want to invest in energy assets to become more self-sufficient. They would come to Gridcog and be like, hey, I know you're UK-based, but can we actually model in the Netherlands as well? Which, was that initial pull that we felt. And then it went more and more into Germany. And now we're actually getting a lot of questions from front-of-meter developers in Germany. So usually big solar developers who are realizing that solar only is not actually that great of a investment case in Germany anymore, because there's so many negative prices now. There's just so much solar now that if they're all generating at the same time, ultimately it puts their portfolio at a huge risk. So what they want to do is they want to add batteries into their portfolios, which is much more complex than solar ever was, because batteries can do so many more things, can trade in so many more markets, but also battery technologies themselves obviously are very, very complex. Yeah, and that's kind of where we're currently feeling most of the pull from.
Yeah, that's really nice that it's kind of organically developed for you and that kind of people coming to you for that new opportunity for them. Where do you see kind of that German market expanding into?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, they do really have to tackle large-scale batteries, large-scale co-located battery solar systems to get that kind of level of smart flexibility into the grid. But what is, in my kind of personal opinion, a really underused resource in Germany is actually the fleet of residential batteries. So I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there's a huge amount of residential batteries connected to just solar on, homes, because residential energy tariffs are so high. So people don't want to just not pay for supply tariffs or their utility bills when the sun is shining, but they have invested in batteries to soak up that extra solar and basically become as self-sufficient as possible. But all of these residential batteries are, as we like to call them, dumb batteries that really do just what I described. So soak up excess solar and discharge it slowly into the evening. Whereas all of these with a little bit of a, and I might be a bit naive here, but with a little bit of a more smart inverter system, more smart technology, kind of retrofitted almost, could do so much good for the grid if they acted in a bit more of a smart way, if they actually avoided congestion much more, and could actually also through that make the owners of those battery systems could generate additional revenue for them as well, rather than just cutting the cost of the utility bill.
It's actually a really good point. It's an area that Powerverse is involved in, and what you say about making those inverters smarter and making that flow of energy bidirectional is, we believe, a really important part of the solution.
There you go.
Great answer.
And Laura, what's happening in Germany sounds really exciting for your business. I guess at the moment you're trying to attract more talent into Gridcog. As people are thinking about their careers or a move in their career, what sort of things would attract them to Gridcog?
Yes, I mean, you're very right in saying that we are opening a Berlin office and hiring in Berlin and always looking for new talent in Gridcog anyway. Yeah, what I think, or hopefully attracts smart people into Gridcog is kind of the opportunity to work for the energy transition, or let's say the opportunity to work for the energy transition while doing something analytical and intellectually complex, as well as having a lot of creative freedom, if you want to put it that way. So, talking about my experience in Gridcog anyway, I've never been told by anybody what my to-do list is, for example, which I guess is a classic startup thing. But I think for a lot of young, motivated people, that's super motivating and that creates a lot of drive in terms of you can decide what you want to do next. You can decide what actually would be good for the business. And at the same time, you're accompanying the whole industry to decarbonize and helping them really invest in the right projects that will ultimately help the energy transition.
So good to hear a story about a business that's trying to do the right thing. It's got a great mission behind it, but also it's got that entrepreneurial spirit of creating something out of nothing and giving everybody that opportunity to kind of contribute. You can see why people would want to join.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a good example is we were talking before this about the flexibility of your day so far today. So it's allowed you to be here and have a good day with your parents. So yeah, I think flexibility is something that we really think is important in a business as well. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and more, I think. Yeah, hybrid working environment. We do really put a lot of emphasis in spending time together in the office as well. I mean, we have an Australian team, we have a London team, we'll have a German team. We do want to be seen as one team and one company. We have a annual retreat in Bali, actually, to bring.
Oh, lovely!
I saw that on your website. I was thinking, where have they gone? That doesn't look like Brighton to me.
Yeah, Richard, I think this is something that Powerverse should do too. Let's take note.
One of the advantages of having an Australian HQ.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's the middle, right?
Yeah.
But then of course we also often have early morning calls, which is late for Australia, so there is some difficulty to juggle there.
Yeah,
but
this time of year is good now, though, isn't it? You've just flipped
it
over.
just got worse.
It just got worse
because we change in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So now I think 7 a.m. for us is like 6 p.m. for them.
Yeah,
or something like that.
I remember that daylight saving was awful at this time of year. Yeah, it's early morning calls for us. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, it's just gone that way. I've totally misremembered that. So,
okay.
Earlier starts for everyone.
Just half a year and then we're out of that.
Yeah, you can get through it. Fab, I think we've got one final question for you, which is, what advice would you give to organisations looking to accelerate their own clean energy projects?
I mean, it's a super broad question. It's obviously a really important question, but it does really depend on what type of organisation we're talking about. If we are talking about, for example, what I would refer to as a behind-the-meter site, like a supermarket, a manufacturing site, there are some kind of easier wins, certainly, that they could look into. Of course, it's investing in renewables, but it's also changing utility bills or energy supply contracts, in my opinion. I've been quite shocked at how many huge energy consumers are still on flat energy contracts. And then, of course, investing in a battery makes a lot less sense than it could if they were kind of able to shift around some of the usage at more expensive times to usage at cheaper times. So I think, going into that direction of becoming a little bit more flexible. And if I may take that into the general point of flexibility for our grid as well, if a energy user becomes flexible, that will become actually flexibility as well. So it'll become just as useful as, let's say, a standalone battery connected to the grid, or even, what used to be, or what still is, a gas turbine instead of an intermittent solar panel. So that kind of flexibility can be provided from so many different angles, but a behind the meter site or an energy user becoming flexible can do so much for them due to, different pricing, but also so much for the grid and the system stability.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We've absolutely loved the conversation today. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been super fun.
Great. Thanks very much indeed. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn by searching Powerverse, or share it with someone who might find it helpful. To find out more about our software, visit our website www.powerverse.com. Thanks for listening to Next Time Around. Until next time.